The best part, hey everybody, across all my social platforms and the new Vayner Commerce platforms, I'm Gary Vaynerchuk. I will introduce the wonderfully attractive Robbie Deeks, Ben Fried, and Zubin shortly. However, the best part of this, before we get into coffee and commerce, which is what we're calling this this week or two that I'm going to be doing original content for my podcast and my live platforms around this incredibly exciting launch of Vayner Commerce, which we'll get to in a second. But by far the best thing was we were just about to go live, and I was on with Dustin, who also produces Tea with GaryVee with me. And he said, I'm not going to, when I said, are we going live? He goes, yeah, we're about to go live. He's like, I'm not sure how you're going to know it's going live, but just start in 10 seconds. And then about 8 seconds in, the top left corner of my screen went from scheduled to live. So Dustin, I don't know if you can jump in here and say hello, because I know a lot of people from Tea with GaryVee love you. Dustin, that was the way I was going to know it was live. The thing in the top left corner.
I've never been on the other side, so I don't know.
Understood.
It's a pretty good indicator.
Right. Yeah. Get back to your side, Dustin.
Okay, bye.
All right, love you. Anyway, hello everybody. I see a lot of the comments coming through, just like I do with Tea with GaryVee. So this makes it even more fun for everybody who's listening as a podcast, whether we're doing that tomorrow or a couple days later. Thank you. This is a very special day in the history of VaynerX. VaynerX, if you don't know, is the holding company that houses all these companies that I'm building in the Vayner empire, as I like to call it in my own head, but the Vayner conglomerate of businesses, which starts with VaynerMedia a decade ago. And then kind of grew from a scenario of the acquisition we made of PureWow.com, which started a publishing side, which we call the Gallery Media Group, which homes and houses all those publishing sides. And then just an explosion of like business intelligence, SaaS product, Tracer.tech, the SashaGroup.com, our small business complement, our speaking bureau, Vayner Speakers, and on and on and on. And we add another sister brother to the equation today, officially, something that I will let Robbie tell the origin story of a little bit about Vayner Commerce. And before we get into that, big shout out to Sabir, an early executive at VaynerMedia, who started the initial Vayner Commerce capability inside of VaynerMedia before we've taken it out. So before I went any further, I want to give you a big shout out, Sabir. I hope you're watching or hear this. You were an enormously important part of this journey, along with many other employees. And so why don't we introduce ourselves? Robbie, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm Robbie Deeks, Chief Commercial Officer at Vayner Commerce. I've been with Vayner now for about 2 years, building towards this day, and previously came from Shopify Plus, where I worked for 2 years on the enterprise side.
Very nice. Ben?
Hey guys, Ben Fried. I'm the CTO at Vayner Commerce. You want the life story, or you want the 30-second version?
I'll take the 63-second version.
63 seconds.
Yes,
all right. I've been into computers and technology my entire life. Kind of started building computers when I was 10, messing around with the internet when it kind of first came about, and ultimately started a business when I was 13, building websites and an e-commerce business selling custom-built computers, which I'm sure, as Gary can attest to, if you were doing e-com in the 90s, everyone thought you were a maniac. I think they still think I'm a maniac, so that's fine. I earned the title. So yeah, since then, I kind of built a video streaming news network platform in the kind of early 2000s, catering to car enthusiasts. Again, kind of with that early theme of streaming HD videos, right when people first had HD TVs in like 2002. So that was also a little early. And kind of spent my 20s bouncing around in the kind of tech startup world, built a social shopping platform and some other interesting platforms like that. And then 7 years ago, met Zubin, came to Lucid Fusion. We could spend 4 hours talking about all the stuff we've done over the last 7 years, but let's just say it has culminated into today, which is the launch of Vayner Commerce.
Fantastic. Zubin, want to pick that up?
Absolutely. Great to be with all of you. Zubin Mowlavi, now president of Vayner Commerce, previously CEO of Lucid Fusion. So for 20 years, as Ben mentioned, prior to Ben joining, we kind of did everything in terms of web development, app development, et cetera, for kind of all kinds of companies. And then 7 years ago, decided, hey, we need to bring in, bolster our team, vis-a-vis Ben and the rest of the team, and then really focus on one area. Decided to focus on e-commerce, decided to partner with Shopify Plus and jump on that bandwagon early. And then I'll let Robbie, as Gary mentioned, tell you the origin story of how the three of us met and everything transformed from there.
Fantastic. Well, since we are live, and I'm going to incorporate some comments. Mika Ellis says, I totally admire what Gary has achieved. He is such an inspiring person. Nevertheless, I can't help whenever he speaks, I get stressed. So it's a fun story. Mika, I'm sorry. I don't want to stress you. I actually think it's super, I might be high energy and intense, but I actually think it's patience and slow it down and optimism. So hopefully, Mika, you'll hear some things here that do not stress you. So let's get right into this. How did this all happen? Why don't we start with this? Robbie, why don't you tell the story of the first time we met, and what you thought? I know it's a very fun circumstance. I know the length is interesting. Let's just play it out. Tell us the story of that. I think it's it's one of the seeds. At that point, Sabir had been at Vayner. We were starting to do some e-commerce. For anybody who doesn't know, Vayner Commerce, actually, Zubin, Robbie, how would you describe what Vayner Commerce does? Let's start there, and then we'll go to the origin story.
Yeah, so Vayner Commerce is a full funnel growth engineering firm. So we're focused on the entire funnel, acquisition, conversion, retention, et cetera, across retail, across online, and helping brands basically navigate that path and find sustainable growth across that. Whether it's creative, it's media, it's technology, data sciences, really connecting everything and bolstering it.
Robbie?
I think Zubin covered it pretty well, but in terms of I guess to connect what Zubin just mentioned and the first meeting though.
Actually, before we go there, let me turn what Zubin just said into English that normal people can understand.
Thank you.
Vayner Commerce builds commerce sites for people that want to sell things, makes them better when somebody else built them if they're all fucked up. And also, and most importantly, we've lived through a huge era where people have used Facebook and Instagram and other media outlets to get customers to your website, and then they buy something and you've got a business. The problem is most people don't have their economics right. They don't realize how much money they're losing on shipping. They don't think about packaging and messaging on the shipping. They don't realize that 4,000 landing pages is better than one if their ads match up and they have the ability to produce that much content and creativity. Even on the ads and content, they don't realize that a lot of variations of creative will drive down your CAC, customer acquisition cost. We've assessed the space for a long time. Ben and I have been in Zubin at some level. All of us have pretty much been in our entire careers, because even since I've been running Vayner, I've always got one big eye on winelibrary.com. Email marketing, CRMs, truly understanding the cost of the media or the creative or what's actually driving your business, and then truly thinking about lifetime value. No business, take away e-commerce, a restaurant, a farmer, somebody selling stones 200 years ago. If your whole business was only based on having somebody only shop with you once, you got a fucked up business. So sustainable strategies. So what Vayner Commerce does, if you're watching right now, for the less than 1% that might consider working with Vayner Commerce, there's a consulting side where we literally look at your business, sit down for weeks, come up with better ideas, tell you how to do it, and then potentially either do it for you on the building out or doing stuff, or you take that and do it internally, or you do it with somebody else. And then there's the building and tech side where we build things from day one. Like you're on some janky system that wanted to prove out the concept, and you want to build on top of a platform. And so that's what it does. And so thinking and doing at the macro. So Robbie, first story.
Yeah. So a bit of background. I was at Shopify Plus 2016, 2017, started out on the enterprise side, then went into a team called New Markets. And that role was interesting because it was sort of the peak of, or the beginning of the peak of, the D2C marketing playbook. A lot of venture capital came in, a lot of brands got funded, there's exits. And what was interesting was I sat in conversations with executives, with consultants, with investors, and everyone was saying basically the same thing. Everyone had the same strategies. They had the same tech stack. They had the same approaches. And so it started to become obvious that everything was going to be commoditized out, right? That arbitrage that existed in the early 2010s was going to go away. And as brands started scaling on the platform, on Shopify Plus, to me, I didn't see who they had to turn to from a strategic growth perspective. And so that sort of led to the idea that there'd be an opportunity for a new type of firm in the e-commerce space. But what was important, and sort of tying back to what Zubin was talking about, was all the previous firms and the firms that exist today sort of focus on one area, right? They might focus on creative, or they might focus on technology. With Vayner, they do creative and media. but no one was sort of understanding the full business, nor were they getting exposure to all of those problems. And so the idea was, if you could actually build a firm that understand complete holistic growth and had exposure to all those areas and have top talent in each of those areas, you could start actually growing the businesses in much more sustainable ways and effective ways. And what led me to the meeting with you, Gary, was I thought you were probably, obviously VaynerMedia had scale, but you're also the only crazy enough CEO that could pull off operating all those different functions and bringing them together and changing the culture around creating sustainable growth. And so obviously we had a mutual connection in Alex DeSimone.
How'd you know Alex?
I tried to book you as a speaker in Amsterdam like 2 years earlier through Alex. And he tried to sell me too many Gary books, so it didn't actually happen. Yep. But so
sounds like you were trying to steal me on some arbitrage shit that we didn't appreciate on our side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we essentially got that 10-minute meeting in New York in your office.
Say that one more time for the kids in the back.
10-minute meeting.
So let's shoot straight here, because we've never had this talk. Let's make this entertaining, or at least interesting or insightful, or bring value in different ways. When you see that the meeting is 10 minutes, do you think I'm a dick face? Do you think I'm efficient? Do you think did you start knowing you a little bit? Did you start thinking about strategy? Like, did you think that you were gonna schmooze your way into 30? Like, how did you think about that?
So when I saw the 10, Alex obviously set the expectations that it was going to only be 10 minutes, but I had kind of already known your persona, and we're both fast talkers. So I actually felt pretty
Confident?
Good about it. Yeah. And going into the actual meeting, I basically articulated a lot of what I just said, and gave the context on, basically I thought the market was heading to a place that wasn't good, and no one else was gonna, solve it. And I think what became obvious very early on was you've been thinking about e-com probably for the past 10 years. And so you finished a lot of the sentences. And I think it was around minute 4 that you kind of just hired me. And then and then it escalated to you sort of talking about the empire building and all of that. And that was the 10 minutes. And then that was that.
Yeah, and I remember, was our second meeting while I was filming Planet of the Apps or
in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Like I met you and like we literally had a meeting in the
CBC parking lot.
Yeah. CBS. You're not in Canada anymore.
CBS. Yeah.
Okay, so Zubin, pick up this story. So Robbie and I start jamming.
So Robbie calls me.
Good
so
job.
I'm actually in San Francisco. I remember it's September 17th, 18th, 2017. He calls me, and I'm on my way to a friend's wedding. He calls me and says, hey, and we'd met because we did a number of deals together at Shopify Plus, most notably the hundreds. We worked on that together. And so Robbie, Ben, and I had met in Waterloo, Canada. Months before that, Ben and I did a lunch and learn with the Shopify team to explain how we leveraged their technology, extended it, all this stuff, content and commerce. Had a great time over there in Waterloo. Met Robbie. And Robbie says to me, we're going to the airport the next day. Robbie says to me the night before, can I get a ride with you to Toronto? And I said, sure. Now find out years later, as you mentioned, Robbie being strategic, he actually planned that entire conversation to tell me that he didn't have a ride so he could ride with me and we could chat. So we start chatting, have a great conversation on commerce, tech, all this stuff. We missed our exit. That was not planned. And we missed our exit. And it took us another 40 minutes to reroute. And in that 40 minutes, we bonded, and that's when we realized, okay, shit, there's something special here. What are we going to do about it? So come September of that year, he tells me he's going to go meet with you and says, look, I'm thinking about different things, and I'm going to go talk to Gary Vaynerchuk. Do you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? And I said, yeah, I know of him. He said, I want to see what opportunities there are in New York and whatnot. And I said, look, if it doesn't work out with Gary, you call me. You're an amazing salesperson. I'll hire you. So he calls me a week later and says, I had a great meeting with Gary. Gary's going to come to LA in December, and he wants to meet you for breakfast. And I said, brilliant. I'd love to meet Gary. And he said, Gary usually takes 10, 15-minute meetings. You're going to get an hour with him for breakfast, which is like the opposite side of the anxiety scale of 10 minutes, filling 10 minutes of time is easy. Filling an hour of time with Gary, fuck, are we going to do this? But we hit it off, and we hit it off on a human level. I think it was really important for me to understand kind of what you do, what VaynerMedia does. For a lot of people that don't understand what you do at VaynerMedia or what the company does, VaynerX, they don't know the full extent of your organization and you, frankly. And so having that conversation and aligning on so many different
Zubin,
like
on some
personal,
real shit,
professional,
because this is actually something I think a lot about.
Yeah.
Was it in that meeting you're like, oh, this guy's not a mascot, he's an operator?
Yes.
That makes sense.
And
to
it
me.
was,
I mean,
and it was, and it was,
go ahead.
it was beyond an operator, right? It's like, to Robbie's point, I think you meet different people, interact with different people. There are people that position themselves as one thing or another, and they don't have that depth. And you have that conversation, and again, in like 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, oh man, I really like this guy. He actually gets it. And it's not just talk. And then I think you mentioned something like that to me. And then we realized like there's a lot of alignment there. And again, people don't understand the magnitude of the organizations and businesses that you built, right? Many of the people that are listening right now. And that became abundantly clear to me in like 15, 20 minutes. So I'm like, okay, this is awesome. How are we going to like work together?
I want to add some context to that too. So I called him so you went, Gary, in that 10-minute meeting to like empire building. And it was actually when I was leaving that meeting that I was like, shit, what am I going to do? I need to go build this guy a big business now based on that last 10 minutes. And so, and as much as I love Zubin on a human level, and we did connect, I also realized that they were building something that Ben's going to talk about in just terms of how they approach technology and how we saw the market changing. And so my first call was to Zubin because I knew that they were building something that was going to be critical for, what I thought was all brands on the tech stack, and how they were building technology in just a very different way on Shopify Plus. And Ben, if you want to go into that a bit and just sort of talk about it, but that's kind of like in real time what happened. And then I think I wrote you a note, Gary, saying, hey, we need to buy this business. And you responded and said, how much? and then we coordinated the meeting.
Ben, before we get into what you build on top, because I'm reading the comments, which is the advantage of this podcast that I don't normally have when I'm just doing a podcast, which may mean I never do a podcast in my office again and only do it this way. Talk to me about the biggest mistake people make with building out their website. What is going on with, we brought up Shopify a lot. Robbie comes from there. We're all advocates of it because, the open source nature of it. There are obviously other players, Magento, BigCommerce, things of that nature. Like, what are you seeing at listen, obviously I want to do this podcast because I want people to be aware we're in the game. To be frank, more than that, I want this for history. I can't wait to look back at this in 30 years and, and all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, I always want all my content to bring value. So just shifting a little bit to value from a technologist's point of view, where are you seeing people struggle or make missteps, waste money on tech? A lot of people that are listening to this are just entrepreneurs who don't understand. I had the great benefit of sitting literally side by side, when I'm talking shoulder to shoulder with Eric Kastner, my first CTO in 1998. And I learned a lot, like including, these are real crazy stories. Like I remember the day he looked at me when I was looking up a wine on Yahoo and he said, go to Google. I'm like, what's this? And I remember, this is a real story. I remember landing on google.com, complete white page. And I'm like, these guys are never going to make money. There's no advertising, like that. Like it was just such a fun time for me, but I learned through osmosis. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that look like me didn't get lucky enough to sit next to a technologist practitioner every day for 3 years, 18 hours a day, which led to being more knowledgeable. Like, I think when I got into Web 2.0, everybody was stunned by my product knowledge or understanding, back to what you're bringing up, Zubin, the depth. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs listening right now don't have the you in their life. So they usually want to outsource that to India or Poland, or they want to like cut corners, or they overpay. Let's bring some value. Like what mistakes are you seeing from a tech standpoint with people that are getting into commerce today?
That's a loaded question.
Spitball, common. You don't need to. This is not about being right. This is about scenario sharing that may help. I'm obsessed with one person getting one piece of value that might have. I think a lot of people are about to go into e-commerce, and somebody was about to spend $13,000 on something they don't on $13,000 they don't have, and they may hear you say something that might send them down a different path.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing right now is there's a lot of discussion about like which e-commerce platform is the right platform, right? You mentioned, there's Magento and BigCommerce, and obviously we tend to lean towards Shopify and more specifically Shopify Plus. But there's all kinds of options out there, and it's not necessarily that one platform is the best at everything.
Right.
We like Shopify because it's very flexible in the sense of it's kind of just
Is it and this I actually don't know this. Is it the best price entry, or are there other alternatives? I know Squarespace is starting to play. Like, again, I'm trying to really bring value to the audience. Do you feel like it's the most practical? Like, I always think about WordPress and what that meant to content, and I think about the e-commerce platforms of today. I'm curious what your perspective is for the person that's really trying to start a $50,000 a year e-commerce site. Where do they go? Do they even get a platform?
It depends, right? I mean, if the core of your business is e-commerce, and this is actually kind of the general problem in the industry right now, but if e-commerce is the focus, then Shopify makes a lot of sense. If content is your focus, then maybe something like, again, if you're starting small, something like Squarespace might make more sense, right? So do you use a content platform and then sprinkle some e-commerce on top? Or do you start with a content or an e-commerce platform and try to build content around it?
Has WordPress, Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt, this is out of curiosity. I literally don't know this. Has WordPress started creating WordPress plugins that help for commerce?
Yeah, so like WooCommerce is probably the most popular of those.
Yep.
I'm sure you've heard of those.
I have.
I think a lot of people don't even think of them as WordPress, but yeah, WooCommerce is the WordPress equivalent. So same idea, but it's always this compromise. It's, do you care about content or do you care about e-commerce? And one or the other is going to kind of fall by the wayside.
Makes sense.
Right? And so it's definitely, I don't want to say that it's a big shortcoming of Shopify, but just any e-commerce platform in general, it could be Magento or BigCommerce, whatever, like they're not great for content. So that gap that we're trying to really fill right now is a no compromises solution where you can make your content and have proper e-commerce in one platform. So that's—
A couple people have asked, what's the difference between Shopify and Shopify Plus? I've seen like 10 questions of that.
Well, the short answer is price, but no, there's a lot more to it. But I mean, Shopify Plus starts at like $2,000 a month, as opposed to like I think core Shopify, they brought it down to, I think it's $9 a month now for the starter plan. So they're aimed at very, very different businesses. Shopify Plus probably doesn't make sense unless you're doing like 10 million in revenue or so. Maybe just depend if you need the features.
I'm trying to think about 2,000 a month, starting point, like that's only $48,000. I think for your tech stack, even if you're a $3 million, it really depends on your profit, right? And if you're raising capital, but like if you're running a $3 million business, kicking $800,000, like what are your expenses? Like it really gets interesting on like where that justifies. But nonetheless, respect.
You could be selling something that's super high margin and it makes sense at $1 million, right? But it really comes down to, for a lot of people, it's feature. So there's certain features that are only available on Plus. Again, they're usually more targeted at larger businesses, like custom gift card functionality or the ability to do really customized discounts and kind of marketing things around that. But if you don't need any of the Plus specific features, you can kind of get away with core for a while and kind of grow into it, which is, I think, Shopify's plan is to, start your small business with us and then they grow with you. And now they're even doing fulfillment, which is crazy awesome.
One thing I want to mention, so Ben's talking about like the tech side of it, just some advice to everybody out there was starting e-com or getting into it, or any business, frankly, right? But I think the thing is people tend to lean away from what they're good at, or they don't value it as much, right? So, and it has to do with people, brands of all sizes. Like they're good at something, they don't really value it, and then they end up trying to do something completely different. Point I'm trying to make here is like with the entrepreneurs out there that are trying to start e-commerce, you're good at something. There's a reason why you want to do something, right? And lean into that. You look at a brand like the Hundreds, that's a client of ours. Like they built streetwear culture. They're part of streetwear culture. You look at their products, you look at the site, you look at the in-store experience. It's all unified, and they leaned into that. So my point with this is like, find out why you're starting this thing, what matters to you, lean into that and double down on that and try to stay core to that. Because to Ben's earlier point about content and all this stuff, that content or whatever you're putting out is only going to resonate with people if it matters to you and you're doing it for a purpose. So on a non-technical level, that's what I would suggest.
There's
Robbie, please go ahead.
So focusing more on as you're scaling, right? So the market in terms of consumer behavior is heavily being driven by Amazon. And if you want to think about essentially what Shopify is doing is they call it arming the rebels, right? Amazon has all these resources to invest into things like logistics and fulfillment, right? Amazon Prime, all these different capabilities. And so they win on price, they win on assortment, they win on convenience. And if you're a brand and you only have a finite amount of resources, you can't afford to keep up with all that innovation because you just don't have that pool of money to invest. Shopify does have the resources for innovation, and not only do they have the resources, they're incredibly consistent, and they have a focus on that as an organization to allow merchants to keep up with Amazon. This is super important in my perspective on what platform you choose. The reason is right now it may not look as obvious of how much Amazon's driving consumer behavior, but if we want to fast forward 12 months, 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years, and you're not keeping up with innovation on things like payments, right, or fulfillment, simple checkouts, then you're going to be allocating all your resources to having to build that yourself if your platform you're aligning yourself with isn't doing that.
Yeah, for everybody who's watching, this happened with media, with social media. This happened with publishing, with WordPress and Squarespace and all the others. It's super it's super important to not only make the right decision, but I want to make sure people aren't crippled by, if you made a decision, if you're not locked, as long as you're not too locked in, you can always pull the Band-Aid off. Nobody likes changing their tech stack. That's why SaaS businesses do well. You end up sitting with that business for an extra year or two, then because you're just so painful to migrate. But at the small scale, which a lot of people who are listening are right now, you're not going to get crushed by making the wrong decision. But to Robbie's point, making the right long-term decision has an impact on your business.
Yeah. Now I want to tie it full circle to why we acquired Lucid Fusion. So at the same time that Shopify is incredibly good at democratizing the tech and enabling a lot of entrepreneurs, they also at the same time eliminate barriers to entry that previously existed, right? So in the 2010s, if you could have a site that could stay up on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that was a value add to the customer, right? You would get that customer's business and they would come back because they know that you could withstand all the different traffic. Now everyone has a site that works extremely well. And so what happens is these barriers to entry that previously existed have gone away. And this is just as true on the acquisition side with things like Facebook and Google Ads. And so what happens is, well, as you have more competition fueled by venture capital, flooding the market, it gets harder and harder to do what these brands want to do, which is build a sustainable direct-to-consumer business. And so what do you do? Essentially, the answer is you have to start building unique IP. You need to start building unique value creation and value propositions for your clients that's actually difficult for others to copy. And if you're just using Shopify's ecosystem of apps and tech solutions as they give it to you, then you have the same tech stack as all these other millions of brands that have no barriers to entry to copy exactly what you're doing. And so what basically the bet we were making was, even some of the biggest brands on Shopify, for them to scale stacks, and they're going to need to leverage what Shopify has the best in the market, which is APIs, right? And build custom solutions and content and commerce on top. And when, coming from Shopify Plus, when I looked at the agency ecosystem, no one was doing that. They're all building within themes and they're all leveraging Shopify's tools versus building custom technology themselves. And so the critical component to Zubin and Ben and what they're building was this ability to leverage all of Shopify's investments into innovation while still being able to build unique IP around content, commerce, and other experiences.
Zubin, as coming from the tech stack side, let's actually come from a different angle. When you and Ben and your amazing team have done its best work, tech's right, it's right. What have you seen the common themes? Because again, I'm trying to bring a lot of value to the listeners.
For sure.
What has been the common theme of you seeing people not be as successful at e-commerce as they thought, or as you thought they should? Because you've created, in essence, the tech stack is almost like the restaurant operating well. But then you also have to get the restaurant people there. You have to do what's been the misstep by entrepreneurs, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and big businesses in your mind?
So I think that
the common ones.
Yeah. So with a lot of the companies, the smaller organizations, you can build them the best tech. They could even have really strong media coming in, but then they hit all sorts of logistical issues, supply chain issues, etc. That's on that side of it, right? From a standpoint. And so it's really important to get all those ducks in a row. The other side of it from a tech standpoint is not really knowing what to do with what we give them. So even if we do everything great, if they don't have the right expertise in-house, because at the end of the day, people hire agencies all the time, organizations hire agencies, but you have to have some expertise in-house. And so whether it's a small organization or a large one.
So too much outsourcing. Like the same way I talk about social media, which
Exactly.
is like, if you don't know how to judge the
Yeah.
work, you're always going to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And you've got to have some level of expertise in-house, right? Like I think the problem is, to Robbie's earlier point about barrier of entry, the barrier to entry is lowered so much for DTC brands that anybody thinks they can just open anything and start selling online, but they don't realize that there's a lot to that business beyond just spinning up a store and selling the product. And I think that's becoming abundantly clear, especially now with so much demand for e-commerce, right? Like we're all seeing it, we're all ordering online, things we would have never ordered. And then people that we know in our lives that never ordered online are all of a sudden ordering things. And they're realizing, the organizations, the companies, the brands, et cetera, that shit, this isn't just a channel for us. This could be the channel that powers everything, including retail.
Is the business.
Exactly. This is the bit, and that's really what it is.
You know, I'm a maniac right now on winetext.com signups because it's becoming the business. The service is so right. The friction is so amazing. Lack of friction so insane. The people are just enjoying the service. And all of a sudden, it becomes like when I launched WineText for my dad, when I came up with the idea and they built it. When I did Wine Library, I never thought of it as an add-on to the liquor store. I always thought the liquor store was going to be the add-on to that business. And I think that's the crossroads a lot of people are going to come to that conclusion in a post-COVID consumer world.
Totally.
Ben,
and the fact.
Ben, as somebody who's apologize for Zubin, get Ben in here for a second. Ben. By the way, everybody who's asking questions on the stream, Ben was on mute because he's a considerate man and he knows that he's in a windy area, so he didn't want any feedback. He understands how technology works. So Ben, you know what I was curious because you've been in the game so long. Like I think back to the biggest miss of my career. I figured out very early on in like 1997 that I saw the data on the carts that weren't completed, and I started contacting people through whatever information I had. And I was doing open cart optimization, and literally it was like a good year or 18 months from then that I even like saw that hit the ecosystem. I don't think I invented it. I don't know what other people were doing, but it's always fun to think back to those early days of like what I saw that then becomes common practice. From a tech standpoint, what are you seeing right now that few people are doing that you think is going to become, of course, in a decade, just trying to bring value to the listeners? Anything stand out right now?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the audience, right? I mean, there's so much stuff. For me, it's like right now everybody wants to talk about retail and e-commerce, and then you've got buzzwords like omni-channel and whatever. Everything's a channel, right? But really, it's all just commerce.
Yeah,
we need to get away. We need to get away from.
No, we're just trying to sell shit here.
Right.
Like I want to do events and sell shit, not just. You're always selling. Always be selling, Ben.
Well, exactly, and it's one of these things where we were probably 5-ish years away from this, and now we're more like it's literally right now because of COVID-19. I wish the motivation to get all this stuff done now was for a different reason, but that line is so blurry now, right? If you order some products from Walmart in their app, and then you drive to the store and they put them in your trunk, was that e-commerce or was that retail? It was neither, right? It's just commerce. I don't care what you call it.
COVID may actually save Target and other retailers because I think Walmart's big enough to like succeed, but like when I think of like mid-tier like department stores, Five Below and all this, like I actually think the curbside is going to give them a chance with same-day delivery, like in a way that really is going to be meaningful.
Exactly.
Do you predict, and this is just a guess because it's too early, do you think curbside is now a standard for retailers in 36 months?
I think so. I'd be very disappointed if when this all blows over, that went away. I mean, I think people will get very used to that convenience. It's just a better experience, right? It doesn't need to be about, it's touchless obviously right now because, we want to be social distancing, but it's still a way better experience. And then I think the more important part is you can turn all these retail stores into more of an experiential, shopping place, right? It's more like the IKEA model or something like that, where you go in and you can try the product.
Ben, I apologize for interrupting. I'm going on mute. People are mad that I'm interrupting, and they asked if I can go on mute, so I'm going on mute. Robbie, you take over. I'm going to take a 3-minute break with my excitement. Go ahead.
You can keep going, Ben.
No, I'm just saying, it would be great if, and we actually had a conversation about this the other day, but if you walk into, Best Buy or something and you're going there to try out the products and then when you pick out the one that you like and it's waiting for you at the register and they just pop it in your car, that's a much better experience than going into a store that right now is basically just aisles and aisles of boxes, right? I mean, it's not an experience right now. In the same way on the e-commerce side, you know, and then we talk about content and commerce. The content's so important because if you're just showing a boring catalog of stuff, you're trying to compete directly with Amazon. Like they've got that game down, right? You're not going to win the, I just want to look at a bunch of stuff. But if you're actually telling a story and you're connecting with your audience, right? That's something that Amazon can't compete with, right? That's not their goal. So, you know, again, I think you're going to see that experience change online and in store.
And I think it's. Go ahead, Zubin.
Go ahead, Robbie.
Thank you. So yeah, I think it's an interesting. It's related also to driving sustainable growth on the .com. I think there's been a lot of assumptions made around what the value is of D2C. You know, we've seen this in terms of if you just look at where the majority of brands allocate resources on a D2C operation, they allocate it to the acquisition, they sell the product, and then there's that's the majority of their resource allocation, and they think the value creation for the customer is in the product alone. And then if you're in food and bev, you don't see even the value in D2C because you can get that on Amazon. What we've figured out was that that's just sort of a broken understanding, and it's built on a lot of sort of flawed assumptions. There's tons of ways, whether it's delivery or SMS, like Gary's been able to break down with wine text. There's all these different areas to create value for your customer, and not only should brands be aware of that, they actually have to shift towards that because everyone else has figured out the value creation on acquisition and having an easy having a P2P in a Shopify store. And so I think we see a lot of problems with sustainability and loyalty and lifetime value is there's been no resources or time spent on figuring out what is that actual value creation we want to deliver over the life cycle of a customer at every point, post-purchase as well. And so I think there's a lot of connections there where people just have certain assumptions on how D2C works, what retail does, what Amazon does, and they've never even experimented or understood really what their consumers were looking for.
I think there's a really important point for those of you at home in terms of what Robbie's talking about, and then like to kind of back to, as Gary was mentioning, translating what I said, to translate a little bit of what Robbie just mentioned right now. What we've realized, and that applies kind of to all brands starting at any size, is that it's not about being right every time. It's about realizing that right is not a binary concept. It's not yes or no. It's like you have these goals, you want to get to these goals. It's not only when you cross that line were you successful. And really what we've realized is that being almost right most of the time is better than being precisely right occasionally. And so we apply that to everything we do. As Robbie's talking about, and we were mentioning earlier, I was talking about like full funnel growth and whatnot. What it really means is that we try to find right for our clients, as you should try to find right with everything you do, and not feel like you know what's right or that you know what's right. But you got to get into it and you got to test this stuff. And so whether it's tech, whether it's messaging, it's creative, it's media, everything you're doing, you've got to test the shit out of it in order to find out like what's the best thing for your brand, what's the best thing for you, and then ultimately for your consumers. What do they care about in terms of your brand? You're going to talk about all these things about this widget that you have and why it's so great, and then realize that the reason why they want it is because it's pink, and that's the only reason they want it. So fucking down on the fact that it's pink and build your entire narrative around that. So I think that just test and iterate as much as you can, and that's where you'll really actually find like those unicorn opportunities to massively scale.
And I think. Go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead. I was just going to say one thing on that too. A word or buzzword that kind of irks me is best practices. They're important, right? No doubt. It's a great starting point, but that's literally all that it is. Like best practices are where you can maybe get an idea of where to start testing, but this idea that I don't need to test because I'm following all the best practices and like Amazon already figured this out for me, total bullshit, right? It might work for Amazon. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So really that testing and using a tech stack that allows you to easily test is kind of one of the most important things that you can do.
Yeah, and Gary, you asked at the beginning, how to describe Vayner Commerce. I think this sets up maybe the most important point, which is we're talking about all these things, and the observation we've had is no one's built the right infrastructure for it, right? So we've built the infrastructure of all these D2C brands or modern day brands around acquisition. We've built cultures around it. We built measurement systems around it, and so to create a system to operate at a level of experimentation across the full funnel requires not having constraints, right? So some of those constraints are technology. Some of them are how you actually organize your people. Part of it is your measurement systems. And I would say even the most sophisticated brands we've come across, the ones that get the praise in the headlines, aren't structured in a way to take advantage of all the things that we're talking about. And so the infrastructure is broken, and it was built on the back of where value was created in the 2010s, right? Which was the gold rush of paid media. That now that the value creation, where value is created now has shifted, it's a moving target. These infrastructures haven't adapted, and they're not built to now capture it. And so I think the good news for the audience, whether you're a Fortune 100 executive, whether you're an entrepreneur, or whether you're already in one of these brands, is it's a level playing field. I don't think the Fortune 100s are behind. I don't think the D2C brands are behind because they're running out of media. Everyone's starting in the same, they're starting at the same race because it's a new game that requires a new way of thinking about growth. And no one, from our observation, and we've talked to hundreds of brands, have built the infrastructure to be able to do it.
All right. That was about as difficult of a task as I've ever had in my entire life. And there was really good stuff coming out, but unfortunately, I almost died. All right, so let's wrap this up because I got to get to my next meeting, pretty much. I'm really excited. I hope the audience got some value out of that. I really tried to steer the conversation into, it's always tough when we launch a new company. We did it with Sasha. We did it with other things. We've been excited. Me and Robbie have been sitting on this for 2+ years, going back to Sabir and some of the great people on our team, Angela and Axel and others. We've been sitting on this for a very, very long time. Obviously we did some commerce capabilities inside of VaynerMedia as a division, but to be a standalone company, to have VaynerCommerce.com, please, everybody who's listening right now, if you have any commerce needs or anybody that does, please go check out VaynerCommerce.com, fill out the forms. I think the team did an incredible job. I would argue it's probably the best VaynerX company's website at this point on its initial launch. So good job on that team. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space. Forget about Vayner Commerce and what we're bringing to the table. I think anybody who's listening, if you do not realize how much opportunity there is to sell stuff on the internet and how early we are, whether you believe the reports, or I think Zubin, Ben, keep me honest here, Robbie, 14-15% of all commerce now is e-commerce, was 12 forever. I think we all probably agree that we'll see a bigger spike and probably have zoomed up 2, 3, 4 years in advance because of COVID. The opportunity for so many entrepreneurs, and more importantly, if you're a big company, if you own a store, if you're listening right now and you own a store, and your store or stores does $5 million a year in revenue, top line, if you are not seriously getting serious about launching an e-commerce, not the bullshit that you check the box in 2002 and you have one, and it's a still garbage fucking static picture and like some dog shit. I mean, like really, really getting focused about e-commerce during this time. Get yourself educated. Check out things like 2PM, my buddy Webb Smith, 2pml.com. Like that's a good source. Robbie, I know that's a newsletter that we respect. Is there any other sources? I mean, there's Google. You can look up shit. Is there any other sources? I know we're planning on putting out a good amount of content. I just really want to help this community get serious about it. Any other things stand out to you, Robbie, from a content standpoint? I know you follow all this shit.
No, I think 2PM is good. I think we're gonna work to fill a void that's there, and then I think we could probably put together a Twitter list of people to follow and different things.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you on the Vayner? Is it at Vayner Commerce, the Twitter handle? Mm-hmm. Everybody who's interested in this, go check out Vayner Commerce on Twitter. It's Vayner Commerce, one word, no spaces, all that. Vayner Commerce. Robbie team, do me a favor, show a little love to the community that you guys grew up in. Put out some handles of people that people should know about as well. And so, any last parting shots, Ben, Zubin, Robbie?
No, this is great. Let's do it again. Thanks.
It was awesome.
Awesome.
Thank
For
you.
everybody who's listening and watching, I'm going to have a bunch of really interesting people on the podcast, Coffee and Commerce, kind of little sub-brand that I'm going to play under, hopefully 5 or 6 meaningful interviews over the next 2 weeks that you can learn from. This kind of launches it. You kind of become aware of the characters. I really appreciated the love that Ben, Zubin, and Robbie got in the comment section on the live streams. Really very kind words. I hope you guys are able to go look back and see the nice words. I also
thanks,
appreciate
guys.
the mute session I went through. It was a great moment in my life. Something I hope I might have to repeat. And,
A moment of silence.
Yeah, it was tough. And thank you for everybody listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope we've inspired some new thoughts or some hypotheses that you can double click into. Have a great day. And Vayner Commerce is here. Big day. I would argue the company I probably should have started my world with, given that I had credibility in commerce in 2009 when I started VaynerMedia. But we've gotten here eventually, and we're excited to do a bunch of good work. And if you need any help, please go to VaynerCommerce.com, fill out the forms, check us out. I think we're even hiring, Robbie. I saw there was a section of that. People so a lot of cool stuff there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Zubin, Ben, Robbie. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
See you.